Hello, and welcome back to the newest episode of Screenchat. This series is focused on helping dungeon masters, both old and new, understand some of the more complicated strategies you can use when role-playing the various NPCs in your adventures. Last episode, we discussed the various types of oozes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, their various differences, and how to use them as both living creatures and environmental hazards for your party to work around. Today, we will continue exploring this idea by learning about the ooze combat. Now, as previously mentioned, it is important to remember that oozes are largely categorized as defensive scavengers. While they can certainly attack and ambush a party, most times the players won't know they are being attacked by an ooze until they literally wander right into them. As such, it's up to the dungeon master to convey their danger not through flashy attacks or complex strategies, but instead through careful placement and preparation utilizing their unique traits. Remember, most oozes have access to either camouflage or amorphous abilities. These allow them to hide and ambush unsuspecting party members rather than just strike at the first sign of danger. But with that said, not all oozes trap their victims the exact same way. So, in order to understand their strengths, we must first understand their capabilities. Up first, we have the Grey Ooze. With an armor class of 8 and 22 hit points, it may seem like the ooze is an easy target to take out. However, it has quite a few hidden surprises. First off, it has damage resistances to acid, cold, and fire damage, condition immunities to being blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, or prone, and, with its false appearance, it can remain motionless and be indistinguishable from an oily pool or wet rock. In addition, its most dangerous aspect is its corrode metal. Any non-magical weapon made of metal that hits the ooze corrodes. After dealing damage, the weapon takes a permanent and cumulative -1 penalty to damage rolls. If its penalty drops to -5, the weapon is destroyed. Non-magical ammunition made of metal that hits the ooze is destroyed after dealing damage. It can eat through 2-inch thick non-magical metal in one round, making any defensive play like a metal container almost worthless. Helping this is its pseudopod attack, where, with a +3 to hit and a 5 feet reach, it deals 1d6 plus 1 bludgeoning damage, plus 2d6 acid damage. And, since it's actually touching you, it does activate the corrode metal, meaning that if the target is wearing non-magical metal armor, it is permanently corroded just like a weapon. Any armor reduced down to 10 AC is automatically destroyed. Moving up in danger, we have the Ochre Jelly. This beefy yellow amorphous blob has the same armor class as the Grey Ooze, but 45 hit points. It has resistance to acid damage with an outright damage immunity to lightning and slashing damage. In addition to the spider climb, where it can climb difficult surfaces such as upside down on ceilings, the Ochre Jelly has the split ability. As a reaction, when a medium or larger jelly is subjected to lightning or slashing damage, it takes no damage at all and is instead split into 2 new jellies if it has at least 10 hit points. Each new jelly has hit points equal to half the original jellies, rounded down. New jellies are automatically one size smaller than the original, meaning you can't have a tiny become something even smaller. That's the relative base for Ochre Jellies. That being said, they still get the exact same action each turn, which is a pseudopod attack, with a +4 to hit, reach of 5 feet, to deal 2d6 plus 2 bludgeoning damage, plus 1d6 of acid damage. It can be very easy to add up, going from just 3d6 plus 2 a turn, to 6 plus 4, to even 9d6 plus 6 if they get hit by slashing or lightning damage even once, which, for a party that hasn't encountered them, is very, very likely. Always remember the golden rule of combat. The side with more turns generally tends to have an advantage. Up next, we come to the star of all oozes, the gelatinous cube itself. With an armor class of 6 and 84 hit points, it certainly is one of the more bulky versions of the ooze type. Its first ability, Ooze Cube, helps define and explain its key feature. As the name implies, a gelatinous cube takes up the entire 10 by 10 foot volume of the space it acquires. Other creatures that enter the space are automatically subjected to the cube's engulf ability and have disadvantage on any saving throw around them. Any creature inside the cube can be seen, but also have total cover. If they are trapped inside, one of their allies or another creature within 5 feet of the cube can take an action to pull a creature out, but doing so requires a successful DC 12 strength check, and the creature making the attempt takes an additional 3d6 acid damage. A cube can only hold one large creature or up to 4 medium or smaller creatures inside it at a time. The next ability, Transparent, states that even when the cube is in plain sight, it takes a successful DC 15 Wisdom passive or active perception check to spot a cube that is neither moved nor attacked. A creature that tries to enter the cube's space while unaware of the cube is surprised by it. This is how so many DMs can pull a fast one on the party by having them literally walk into it. If they can't see the cube around them, they simply walk inside, and the cube is all too happy to engulf them in the process. In terms of combat, the cube mainly has two key features, its pseudopod and engulf abilities. The pseudopod is a melee weapon attack with +4 to hit and deals 3d6 acid damage. Engulf is more complicated and is the key feature of the cube. As an action, the cube moves up to its speed, and while doing so, it can enter a large or smaller creature's spaces. Whenever it does so, the creature must make a DC 12 dexterity saving throw. On a successful save, the creature can choose to be pushed 5 feet back or to the side of the cube. A creature that chooses not to be pushed suffers the consequences of a failed saving throw. On a failed save, the cube enters the creature's space, and they take 3d6 acid damage and are engulfed. While engulfed, they can't breathe, are restrained, and take 6d6 of acid damage at the start of each of their turns. When the cube moves, the engulfed creature moves with it. An engulfed creature can try to escape by making a DC 12 strength check. On a success, they escape and enter a space of its own choice within 5 feet of the cube, but on a failure, they're still stuck. The next Ooze ramps up the difficulty and challenge rating by combining elements from the prior 3. By using the gelatinous cube's bulk, the gray Ooze's corrode metal, and the ochre jelly's split, the black pudding is a behemoth of an enemy. It has an AC of 8 and a staggering 85 hit points, as well as all of the others' condition and damage immunities. In addition, its corrode metal deals an extra 1d8 acid damage to anything that touches or attacks it, adding injury to insult. In terms of combat, the black pudding attacks with a +5 pseudopod that deals 1d6 + 3 bludgeoning damage and 48 acid damage. Finally, just like the jelly, the pudding can split when hit by slashing or lightning damage, although it has a much larger hit pool to work with. Moving on, we come now to the odd Ooze out in the lineup, the Slithering Tracker. Although it has a respectable armor class of 14, much higher than most other Oozes, as well as a bolstering 39 hit points, there are a few key weaknesses that hold the Slithering Tracker back. First and foremost, it has no damage immunities, instead merely resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks, as well as a crippling damage vulnerability to both cold and fire. But in the plus side, it does have a few extra condition immunities, including exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, and unconscious. Now, in addition to a semi-amorphous equivalency and spider climb, the Slithering Tracker has one key feature that sets it apart from other Oozes, its false appearance ability. If a Slithering Tracker is motionless at the start of combat, it has advantage on its initiative roll. Moreover, if a creature hasn't observed the Slithering Tracker move or act, that creature must succeed on a DC 18 Intelligence investigation check in order to discern that the Slithering Tracker isn't a puddle. This can be very important, especially when coupled with its +8 to stealth, in giving them both advantage on their initiative roll and their first attack against someone. Now, in terms of attack, they have two key ones. Slam, a +5 melee weapon attack that deals 1d10 + 3 bludgeoning damage, and Life Leech. One large or smaller creature that the Slithering Tracker can see within 5 feet of it must succeed on a DC 13 Dex saving throw or be grappled. Until this grapple ends, the creature is restrained and unable to breathe unless it can breathe water. In addition, the grappled target takes 3d10 necrotic damage at the start of each of its turn. The Slithering Tracker can only grapple one target at a time, but while grappling the target, the tracker takes only half any damage dealt to it rounded down, and the target takes the other half. Finally, as a bonus action, it can use its watery stealth ability to take the hide action and make a stealth check with advantage when it's underwater. Rounding us out, we now come to by far the most powerful version of Oozes, the Oblexes. Since they have 3 different stat blocks based on the size and age of them, I will first go over a few key features they share, then talk about the individuals one at a time. First off, all Oblex have the Amorphous ability, as well as aversion to fire. If an Oblex takes fire damage, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the end of its next turn. In addition, they also do not require sleep, although this ability doesn't specify whether or not they can be put to sleep. As such, their condition immunities are limited to just blinded, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, and prone. Up first, we have the Oblex Spawn. With an armor class of 13 and 18 hit points, these little guys are rarely seen on their own. They only have the pseudopod attack available to them, dealing 1d4 plus 3 bludgeoning damage, as well as an additional d4 of psychic damage. Most often, a spawn is simply nearby an adult or elder Oblex, either serving as an extension or as a minion for scouting or recruitments. Next up is the adult Oblex, where things really start to get dangerous. The combat rating of 5, 14 armor class, and 75 hit points. This is easily one of the more dangerous oozes a party will encounter. First and foremost, they have a multi-attack ability, allowing them to make 2 pseudopod attacks, as well as their Eat Memories ability. Now, the pseudopod itself has a plus 7 to hit, dealing 2d6 plus 4 bludgeoning damage and an additional 2d6 psychic damage. But their main attack is their Eat Memories ability. Once per turn, an Oblex can target one creature it can see within 5 feet and force them to make a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw. On a failure, they take 4d8 psychic damage and become memory drained until it finishes a short or long rest, or until it benefits from a greater restoration or heal spell. When drained, the target must roll a d4 and subtract the number rolled from its ability checks and attack rolls. Each time this ability is drained again, the die increases by 1, from a d4 to a d6, a d6 to a d8, and so on until it becomes a d20, at which point the target becomes unconscious for 1 hour. In addition, the Oblex learns all of the language of a memory-drained target and gains all of its skill proficiencies, be it stealth, weapons, or armor class. More on this later. Finally, as an action, they can cast any of the 3 spells requiring no components and using intelligence as a spellcasting ability. Spell save DC 15. Charm Person at a 5th level, Detect Thoughts, and Hypnotic Pattern. As a bonus action, they can activate one of their most sinister abilities, Sulphurous Impersonation. By extruding a piece of itself that assumes the appearance of one medium or smaller creature, the Oblex can create a small copy of any creature whose memory it has stolen. The simulacrum appears, feels, and sounds exactly like that creature, though it always smells faintly of sulfur. They can impersonate up to 1d4 plus 1 different creatures, each one tethered to its body by a strand of slime that can stand up to 120 feet away. The simulacrum is an extension of the Oblex, meaning that the Oblex occupies its space and the simulacrums simultaneously. The tether itself is immune to damage and can only be severed in one of 2 scenarios. The first is if there is no opening at least 1 inch wide between the Oblex and the simulacrum. However, I would also contend that the Oblex can intentionally disconnect the tether if so required. Finally, we come to the oldest and most powerful Oblex and Ooze in the game, the Elder Oblex. With a staggering 16 armor class and 115 hit points, it's no doubt why they are so powerful and dangerous. The Elder Oblex, much like the adult, makes 2 pseudopod attacks a turn, as well as using its Eat Memories. However, it does 46 bludgeoning damage and 46 psychic damage, coming out to a staggering 8d6 plus 3 total damage. Its Eat Memories ability has also been increased to a DC 18 Wisdom savings throw and 8d10 psychic damage. Its spellcasting abilities have also been increased, allowing it to cast Charm Person and Detect Thoughts as well as the following spells 3 times a day each: Dimension Door, Dominate Person, Hypnotic Pattern, and Telekinesis. All of these, of course, have a spell save of DC 18 rather than the usual 15. Now, when it comes to Sulphurous Impersonation, the Elder Oblex can control up to 2d6 plus 1 different creatures, still up to 120 feet away with the same rules and limitations as the adult. But, with that being said, there are a few things I want to now talk about when it comes to the simulacrums. I personally would like to rule that since a oblex gains the knowledge and skill proficiencies of its target, it wouldn't be unreasonable that it could then transfer them to their simulacrums. Again, there is no specific ruling on this within any of the source books, but for my money, I always like to homebrew simulacrums exactly as written in the stat blocks. Extensions of the oblexes. They move on the exact same initiative as their hosts and make their attacks as substitutes for the pseudopods. So while this may, in certain circumstances, not deal as much damage, even comparing, say, a heavy crossbow to the pseudopod attack, I feel like it does highlight a very important aspect of the oblex: deception and subterfuge. Remember, oblexes were designed by the Mind Flayers to be master manipulators and brain eaters. Their primary goal is to trick their targets into getting close enough so they can eat their minds and drain their memories. Towards that end, I think using the simulacrums as decoys for the party to attack while the host gets closer to them is a perfect way to utilize their abilities. Now, in order to keep things balanced, I personally always have the simulacrums share the same hit pool as the host. It makes perfect sense since they are both made from the same material, and if they're going to share the same attacks, they should also share the same hit points. You may find some DMs who will view the simulacrums as immune to damage, same as the tethers, but I personally would disagree. Regardless, however you choose to play this in your game is up to you, and feel free to balance as you see fit based on what your party is capable of. And those are the primary stat blocks for Oozes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I know that was a lot of information thrown at you all at once, so let's go ahead and demonstrate this through a practical example. This is going to be a Tier 2 encounter comprised of an adult oblex and 2 black puddings for a group of 3 level 7 adventurers. Specifically for this adventure, I will be using a level 7 Way of the Shadow Halfling Monk, a level 7 Celestial Warlock Yuan-Ti, and a level 7 Path of the Totem Warrior Minotaur Barbarian. These 3 in particular were chosen for a specific strategy I like to call Operation Shadow. We'll see that in action in a few minutes, but the rough idea of this is to show how even a party with optimal synergy between one another can fall victim to well-placed oozes and creative strategy on the Dungeon Master's part. Now, for the adventure itself, we open up with a little bit of backstory. The adventurers have been chasing down a goblin into a dark catacomb. It holds a giant great axe, comedically twice its height. The Minotaur shouts out, "Hey, give me back my weapon," just as the monk seems ready to catch up. But the goblin rounds a corner into a private chamber and disappears before anyone can see them. Looking around, this seems to be some kind of operating theater or private sanatorium within the facility. The area is eerily sterile, devoid of any furniture or stains, save for a few black streak marks on the floor. But despite appearances, the whole room has the acrid and pungent stench of sulfur wafting throughout it. Compared to the rest of the abandoned and decaying catacombs, this room sets off all of the group's danger senses. The monk goes ahead and starts surveying the area, paying careful attention to the grates. The warlock sends out their familiar, trying to see if there is anything else their rat can pick up or sense in terms of danger. The barbarian, however, thinks that there is no danger in this room and tromps over to pick up their great axe by the grate. But just as they move forward, they begin to hear a faint gurgling sound coming from the grates. The monk tries to warn them to step away, but it's too late. Everyone is asked to roll perception checks, but only the barbarian and monk succeed, as a giant bubbling mass of inky ooze begins gurgling and overflowing throughout the front and back of this room. Simultaneously, a large oak door begins to materialize and slam shut in front of the archway entrance, trapping everyone inside with the oozes. Above, torches flicker on as 4 goblins armed with short bows peek their heads over on the operating theater room. They aim down at the party, ready to start peppering them with arrows as soon as they make the first move. Everyone is told to roll for initiative. The warlock is up first, getting a nat 20 on their initiative roll. However, since she failed her perception check, she will have to skip this round 0. Her familiar also is skipped due to the fact that they helped with that roll, but will not be able to attack this turn. The monk goes up next, using his action to cast darkness for 2 key points, then asking how tall the wall is and if the area is dimly lit. The DM looks and confirms that the wall is about 30 feet up and that the corridor around them is roughly dimly lit. As a bonus action, he teleports 40 feet using Shadow Step to the top of the battlements and ends his turn. The barbarian is up next. She uses a bonus action Rage and then swings at the first black pudding using her +2 Great Axe. But to her surprise, the pudding takes no damage and instead splits into 2 puddings. As a result, the barbarian also takes 3 acid damage for attacking the pudding, rounded down to 1 thanks to her bear totem's resistances. With her second attack, she recklessly attacks with her horns, allowing her to negate the disadvantage from darkness and hit with a 24. The Ooze takes 8 piercing damage, while the barbarian takes 7 acid, half to 3. The Obelix is up next. As an action, it casts Hypnotic Pattern on the operating chamber. Since the spell specifies that the creature must see the pattern, the puddings are completely unaffected by it. As such, the Warlock and Barbarian make wisdom saving throws, succeeding on an 18 and 15 respectively. We now go to the puddings, who take 3 attacks against the party, 2 against the Barbarian, 1 against the Warlock. The Warlock dodges with a 12, while the Barbarian is hit by a 19 and a dirty 20. Adding them together, she takes 39 total damage, half down to 19. But, glass half full, this also leads us back to the top of the order. The Warlock goes up first and uses their slippers of spider climbing to climb up the wall to avoid the puddings. While the pudding unfortunately does get an opportunity attack, hitting with a 21 and dealing 19 acid damage, the Warlock thinks quickly and casts Polymorph on their familiar, transforming them from a rat to a direwolf. Meantime, they use their bonus action to heal the Barbarian for 3d6 hit points for a total of 13. The familiar then takes their turn immediately after the Warlock, attacking with their pack tactics. They hit with a 23, dealing 12 points piercing damage to one of the puddings and taking 7 acid damage in return. Next up is the monk, who starts attacking the closest goblin towards him. First attack hits and deals 9 points bludgeoning damage, but the goblin is still standing. Confused, he hits a second time, 8 points, still standing. Starting to get a little concerned, he spends a preemptive key point to activate Fury of Blows. Third attack misses, but the fourth lands, dealing 5 points damage. Finally, the goblin goes down, but instead of dying, his body just melts. Much like the puddings, it just congeals into a thick putty that flows down a drain at the top floor. Panicked, the monk looks around to see the nearby goblin do the same, while the others train their bows directly onto the party, as if they can see through the darkness. He shouts a warning down to his friends, hoping to alert them that something is up with this encounter. However, the barbarian is too busy to realize this, and uses their attacks against the medium puddings. Only one of the attacks hits, dealing 8 damage, while they take 6 points rounded down to 3 acid damage. That then takes us to the Simulacrum, who, by extending the arm of one of their goblin simulacrums, Stretch Armstrong style, reaches out and touches the Warlock. Horrified by this, they are forced to make a wisdom saving throw, failing with a 13. As a result, they take 13 psychic damage and are told that their memories have been drained. The DM reads out the description of the condition, explaining how they must now subtract a d4 from any ability check or attack roll they make for the next hour. Thankfully, they are still able to keep up their concentration with a 7. The other goblin then makes a shortbow attack against the barbarian, hitting both times as she takes 16 points piercing damage rounded down to 8. Rounding us out, we come to the black puddings. All 3 take attacks, 2 against the barbarian and 1 against the direwolf. Unfortunately, the direwolf is the one hit in this, taking 26 acid and piercing damage. That takes us then back to round 2. As an action, the Warlock casts a 4th level Vampiric Touch, causing the polymorph on their direwolf familiar to fade. They then spider climb over to the kobold and make a melee spell attack. Hitting with a 17, they hit and deal 16 necrotic damage while regaining 8 health. As a bonus action, they then expend 4 more of their healing light dice on themselves. Thanks to Gift of the Ever-Living Ones, they are able to regain a whopping 24 hit points rather than 4d6. The familiar then takes their turn to disengage and run underneath the barbarian. Cut to the monk, who spends a key point to activate a preemptive Fury of Blows. They rush over to the third goblin and make 4 attacks. Hit, miss, hit. On both hits, they activate Stunning Strike, dealing 16 damage. First stun fails with a 15, and the second one unfortunately again fails with a 17. This is becoming dire. The barbarian's up next. Surrounded by 3 oozes, she scoops up the familiar into her backpack and charges through the large pudding for the door. In the process, both medium oozes get opportunity attacks, hitting and dealing 50 points acid damage, half to 25. Grating her teeth and hitting the larger ooze with her horn, she uses her Goring Rush to push it out of her way. In the process, she takes another 8 acid damage, half to 4, but with her last attack, she swings at the door with Reckless Attack. Nat 20. The door splinters and the barbarian rushes out. She emerges badly injured, but free. Turning around, she shouts for her friends to hurry and get out of there before it's too late. Sensing one of its prey has escaped, the Oblex stops messing around. Both goblins dissolve, then congeal into a heaving pile of crimson ooze skulls. The adult Oblex has finally shown itself. It uses both of its attacks on the Warlock, already enraptured by the taste of her memories. She hits with a 25 and 14 for 39 damage. Once again, the Warlock is asked to make a wisdom saving throw. 8, a failure. They take 16 points psychic damage and drop to 0 hit points as the Oblex begins to engulf their entire body and feast upon their mind. The Puddings are up next, splitting off their targets based on proximity. The large one immediately goes after the Barbarian, hitting with an 18 for 22 points acid damage, rounded down to 11. The two mediums then turn their attention towards the monk and use their action to dash up the wall and surround him thanks to Spider Climb. Round 3 starts and things are not looking good. The Warlock makes a death save, getting an 18 and a pass. Sensing their friend is in peril, the monk shadow steps behind the Oblex and attacks with Fury of Blows. 2 attacks hit, dealing 17 points bludgeoning damage. They then activate Stunning Strike, finally stunning the Ooze, who rolls a 12. The Barbarian tries to clear the path for them and takes 2 more horn attacks against the large Pudding with her horns. Both hit and deal 17 piercing damage, but the Barbarian takes 10. Thanks to Stunning Strike, the Oblex's turn is skipped for now. Once more at the bottom of the round, the Puddings attack. The large misses with an 11, but the two mediums catch up and attack the monk. Both attacks hit with a 16 and 21, dealing 36 bludgeoning and acid damage. Up next, at the top of the order, is the Warlock. She makes another death save, rolling a 9 and tying the count. Monk's turn starts, and he uses his last key point to Fury of Blows the Oblex. He hits twice, dealing enough to kill. Striking with everything he has, he pours all of his power into the blow. The result causes an eruption of ectoplasmic entrails to cover him and the Warlock, though none of it is harmful. As a bonus action, he grabs his friend and teleports down to the bottom of the room. He then uses all 50 of his movement speed to get out, taking a single opportunity attack from the Black Pudding. Thankfully it misses, and everyone is able to retreat from this nearly deadly encounter. The largest Pudding pursues them for a few minutes, but eventually gives up once its targets move more than 60 feet away out of its blind sight. It slinks back to the chamber, content to reassemble with the smaller Puddings and wait for their next target to return. If ever. So, there you have it. We've provided a level 7 party with a deadly challenge using only 2 CR4 monsters and 1 CR5. While no combat is foolproof, this is a great example of how to showcase the Ooze monster's strengths. By using the Black Puddings as a deterrent, the players were forced to adapt their strategy and treat them less like an enemy and more as a hazard. As a result, they prioritized the Oblex while keeping out of the Pudding's reach at all times. However, there are a few discrepancies I want to talk about. First, much of the danger in this encounter was from the trapped quarters, not the Ooze on their own. Thanks to their low speed, a smart party can usually outmaneuver an Ooze if given enough space. To combat this, limit their range of movement, be it through trapdoors, locked rooms, narrow hallways, or even sheer numbers. Speaking of which, consider using spellcaster non-player characters with access to spells like Lightning Lure or Call Lightning. They can use these spells to spam an Ooze's split ability and literally flood the room with them. Remember, as long as the Ooze has at least 20 hit points, it can divide. And thanks to their low armor class, hitting them is a non-issue. But of course, this is just one example you can draw from. Like I said during their stat readings, most Oozes wait until their target is within 5 to 10 feet before striking. They are masters of conserving energy, which is what makes them such dangerous and persistent enemies in the first place. Don't be afraid to use the environment to your advantage. Instead of simply throwing them at the party front and center, use them as background hazards, a passive obstacle that forces them to adapt around the Ooze instead of just ignoring or going right through it. Encourage the party to observe their actions and what gets their reaction out of this encounter. If a player has fought an Ooze before, give them the opportunity to use that experience in more creative ways, such as trapping or redirecting its targets. Just like any monster, an Ooze encounter promotes players to think outside the box. Be open to what they suggest and excited to see where it happens while playing one of the world's greatest role-playing games. Thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode and can't wait to see you for the next one.